Okay, welcome back. This time it's going to be the Hunter role that we're looking at. I've gone through each of these gods individually. As you'll see, there's multiple YouTube videos going up of these. This is my tier list of where the Hunters are right now and what position they're in. You may not agree with me. I could go through every single god and put them on a tier list of where they could be, but this is just for individual roles and where I see them standing and what I actually feel they could be in position. You may see one or two that are missing or maybe misplaced in your eyes. Fine. If you don't agree with me, don't have to agree with me. This is just my personal viewpoint on where they stand. Notice how there's no gods in S, S, or S+. Why? Because they all have different innate abilities to each other that cause them to be in a good position. I think Hunter role right now is pretty balanced. As you can see, there's multiple viable targets for this one, and I actually think this is where it probably stands right now with how how the game can be played out. Xbalanque up in the S tier along with Rama, and those two, we're going to talk about Xbalanque and Rama, just those two at the same time first of all. They're both hyper carries in the late game. Their laning phase is pretty safe. They've got about the same amount of wave clear as each other as well. If not, Xbalanque is a little bit stronger, I'd say. They've both got a natural escape. They've both got ultimates that can affect team fights and give them survivability as well. These are both top tier hunters and deserve to be in the S tier. In the late game, the hyper carries will deal a lot of damage in team fights and have a lot of ways to cause issues for your team. Anher's up here as well because of the fact Anher has a great laning phase, has kill potential from level 2 onwards throughout with an impale, cause a lot of damage. His pillar causes issues as well as his passive. He's just a great all-round hunter, is Anher. That's why he's up there in the S tier right now, as he's good at all stages of the game. He's not a hyper carry though, and this is why he doesn't go up to S plus for me. I don't see him as a late game hyper carry. Would I rather have an Artemis at the end of a game or an Anher at the end of the game? Well, it depends if we're above full build. I'd rather have an Artemis. I'd rather have an AMC at that stage, but you can see they're lower. We'll come to them in a minute. But Anher is very strong up till towards the end of the late stage of the game, depending on what hunter you're against. Okay, if you're against somebody, I'd say like how am I going to explain? If you're against someone like Ho Yi at the end of the game, I'd be quite happy to still have an Anher, I guess, considering how Ho Yi is right now. So Anher up there in the S tier, very strong, has good matchups against Rama, decent wave clear for the most part. Has some negative matchups too, but they're not necessarily negatives. It's more about the hypercarry status of them as well. Ul's here because at every stage of the game, Ul is consistent. Ul is consistent throughout the whole game. He's not a hypercarry, but he's consistent burst damage early. His burst damage late is the same. He's a consistent all-round hunter. He's probably the most all-round hunter out of all the hunters on this list. At every stage of the game, Ul still does what he does. A god playing Ul, an amazing player on Ul, can make them even stronger than the hyper carry in the late stages of the game. But he's still safe. He's got natural escape. He's got natural CC as well, which some of these guys don't have CC in the hunter role. He's got a CC, he's got escape, he's got a mobility buff as well, and he just doesn't have the hyper carry status that you see on other of the hunters. Is the reason he's not higher. He's perfectly fine where he is. I think he's a very strong pick in the hunter role. That's all the S's down anyway, and so that's the top 4 for me. Going down to the S minus tier is Cupid and Artemis. Now Artemis struggles in the early phase. Artemis struggles in the early phase and suffers with the same sort of issues as AMC, but she's just above AMC because of how she plays out. She's got that stun available to her, a little bit more of a chance of survival, and the crit passive is just too strong. Artemis is very strong here. Is a hyper carry in the late game. Her early game can be a little bit weaker. She can get punished by certain gods in the laning phase. Xbalanque can cause her some issues, and her can cause her some issues as well. A good Ul player can cause her a lot of issues as well. This is why she's not in this S tier. It's just because her early game is a little bit weak still. It's still not 100% like the perfect early game that you could ask for and cause some issues for her. Her late game is still late game, but she has to get there first. Cupid, along the way, Cupid has good matchups against hunters for the most part, but Cupid in a team fight and Cupid in the late game changes. His early game is very strong. He's got kill potential on pretty much every single one of those gods above him and the gods beside him as well. He's got kill potential. The problem that arises with Cupid is that in the late game, he's lucky to get in close for the initiation with those fields of love. His heart bombs only focus one target down. If you miss that heart bomb, you lose damage potential, and that heart bomb is very important. If you look at Rama, you miss an auto, fine, you just throw another orb. You miss an impale on Anher, it causes an issue, yeah, but you've still got damage potential. Xbalanque, he can still get follow up with poisons. He's got auto attacks. Or you miss an axe, you can still do stuff. Cupid, you miss a heart bomb, you've got to restack that heart bomb again to get your stun available to you. You'll still do decent damage with it. But Cupid suffers with this late game scenario where he's not really classed as a hyper carry just because of the fact that he has to use his flutter to engage and deal damage if he wants to. Fields of Love is pretty short range and wants to be used aggressively to initiate team fights for the most part, or follow up to an initiation. or has to be used defensively. That's why he's ever so slightly further down. He's not the best one, but he does counter some of these S tier gods pretty effectively in lane and can shut them down and make sure that they don't get to the late stages to where some of these S tiers come online and be a big issue. So that's why he's currently sat at S minus right now. Artemis we just discussed, and AMC is where we're up to now. He's A+. AMC is very strong, has fantastic wave clear. The issue is once again, it's his mobility that causes him an issue. No natural escape other than to run or fight and stand and fight. This is why Artemis is above him. They're both very, very similar in what they do. Their late game is destructive and a massive force positioning is key to both of them. Artemis just has a little bit more survivability than an AMC does, and that's why Artemis is ahead. AMC, though, has pretty good matchups. He can kill pretty much all the other targets in S tier if he does get going and gets the opportunity to do so, but he's going to struggle doing it. The A tier is the tier that they're actually playable in the Hunter role right now. They're overlooked for the most part. Some people don't like Neef, some people don't like Apollo because of his wave clear. Some people haven't really looked at Kronos, but Kronos is actually really strong right now and potentially could be higher on this tier list, honestly, if things had changed in the way the meta and how whatever composition your team runs. But Kronos has an attack speed debuff. He's also got fantastic wave clear, good safety with his rewind, as well as he's also got his other abilities to give him burst potential and kill these targets down. Magical damage does a lot against hunters and gets underrated at how much damage you can get going. He has kill potential in lanes. Kronos pretty good in the AD carry, and he's classed as a hyper carry in the late game too, so he's a good one to have. Neith is a very safe pick. Matchups against some of the gods above her is pretty strong. It's hard for them to kill her. She can play this very safely. Late game, she's not a hyper carry though, and she's looking for roots and weaves, and mainly she's a CC support, CC hunter. She's there to support her team in killing off targets. She can, in late game, get crit online and deal some decent damage. But would you pick her over a Rama for late game hyper carry or a Jabalonke? Probably not, unless you need the extra CC on your team and you want to play safer in lane because you're against a very aggressive duo lane that you're going to be struggling against. Then you could look for Neef. Her wave clear is very, very good still. Her spirit arrows do a lot of damage still to the minion wave, and it used to do less, but now it got buffed to do more, and people are still underestimating how much damage a Neef can put out in the early game still. Her ultimate, globally effective, can get you involved in fights, so she's still a pretty good all-round god. Apollo is in the A tier as well. His late game is still the same late game. It's his laning phase that he struggles with now because of his wave clear so beautiful being nerfed. It takes him longer to bring down the minions and cause an issue. If he was put in lane with a Sylvanas, just to point this out, if you put Apollo in lane with Sylvanas, Apollo would be fine. Apollo would be back in the meta still and cause a lot of issues for the enemy team. He still has the split push potential. He's still got that global ultimate that can cause issues. He's still got fantastic inbuilt steroid that can see him as a hyper carry in the late game. He can still 100 to 0 targets just as well as he used to in Season 1. It's just the early game laning phases where he struggles for push potential and people think he's overly weak because of it. I don't think he is. I think he's a pretty all-round decent pick still. He just needs some support from a support player in the laning phase to get him through the issues there. Freya is a little bit further down the list at A-. She has some pretty good matchups against some of the other gods in this lane. She's a hyper carry in the late game, but her early game clear is kind of weak, a little bit like Apollo's as well. Has a CC, also a natural escape, which still deals damage a lot like a Rama. Is a magical version though as well, and sometimes magicals in the hunter role isn't always perfect because at the moment you could see possibly double mages, but at the moment it's quite a lot of physicals going on. Freya can be played and used correctly, and that's why she's on this list of this area right now. I think she's in a decent enough position right now, maybe up or down just a little bit, but where she is, she's okay to be played. She can be picked up in certain scenarios. You just got to be careful about what you're going to try and pick her against for the most part, as she will be pushed in as pulse. You're relying on that for your wave clear, and it's not going to full wave clear with one combo for quite a while. Heading down to the B tier now. As I do these guys, as I go through these, just to explain, for me, anything in A and above is what you should be picking, and anything in B you probably shouldn't be picking. These are just down here because they've been played in the hunter role before, and they're probably not worthwhile playing, or, you know, they're not worthwhile playing or they've been played in the hunter role before. Hou-Yi is down here for me. Hou-Yi has a great team fight. He has a good team fight, and that's it. That's all I'm going to say. His team fight potential is pretty good. His steroid is fantastic with the 2, but the problem with it is that for him to confirm damage, it's very difficult. Ricochet, to get maximum efficiency out of it, you have to bounce it off walls and make sure you land it to do most damage in the fights, and it's unreliable. He's unreliable in terms of damage. His 3 is probably the worst escape in the game, and it's so difficult to use and be effective. I wouldn't really have him there. Vulcan, actually, I've also missed, which I just realised looking at this list too. Vulcan's probably down in the B tier as well. Could potentially actually be in the A, thinking about Vulcan. But that depends on your team composition. He's got decent wave clear. I wouldn't class him as a hyper carry in the late game, but Vulcan allows you to put things elsewhere in it. So I'll probably put Vulcan in the A, maybe B tier. Mercury, going on to him. Mercury was once played as a hunter for the longest periods of time. He can still be played in the hunter role. He can still go for golden bow and clear the wave out effectively. He's going to struggle early game if he gets pushed in against like Sylvanas or something. He's looking to farm up and get big, which is exactly the same as Loki. And those two are both in the same sort of boat. They're looking to get their full builds online before they come online. But when they do come online, they have damage potential and they have kill potential. Would you want to play them in these roles? I'm not so sure. Against some of these other gods they're against, these guys above them are all going to wave clear more effectively for the most part, or have better kill potential without committing it to it too much. That's pretty much the Hunter tier list. I mean, there's a couple of gods that I've missed off here. I mean, the likes of Zeus, the likes of Poseidon, and things like that. But I wouldn't really go through those. If I've not mentioned one, they're generally in B tier. If I have missed one that you clearly think should have been above, please don't hesitate to comment and talk about it, because I will go over them. This is just my personal view of who should be played in the Hunter role. Honestly, anything from A and above should pretty much be picked, and that's kind of the order you want to be picking them. Honestly, up to A is fine to pick. Apollo, depending on who you're with, I feel. Same with Neith and how the composition works. Same with Kronos and Freya. And Muz and Carb, you've got to feel like you've got to have peel from your team and you can position correctly. And anything in S and above is fine. Just remember, Cupid's not a hyper carry late game, neither is Anher. And sometimes you will look for those late game stages as well. This is obviously a solo queue tier list as well as a competitive tier list, because these are the same sort of picks. You're seeing those going forward as well.